RBA delivers ninth straight interest rate hike. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is no laughing matter. This is very serious. And I dare say that this additional interest rate hike may be the final nail in the coffin for many, many Australian families who very likely will be unable to keep up with their mortgage repayments. Now, if you were to watch our federal parliament, you may be under the impression that supposedly this interest rate hike is just one big laughing matter and that no one's really to blame and it's just some sort of hokey pokey business where Labor and Liberal just dance around the edges without ever addressing what the true issues are, resulting in the huge interest rate rises in our country. And I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. So here's a little clip from Parliament the other day of Albo getting questioned on this interest rate hike. Take a look at this.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Before the election, the Prime Minister promised he would deliver cheaper mortgages. Since the election, mortgage repayments have increased by around $1,400 a month for a typical Australian family, and every economic decision the government has taken has pushed interest rates higher than they otherwise would be. Why do Australian families always have to pay more under Labor?
Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. The Minister for Climate Change will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister will be heard in silence. They give him the call.
It's a reality of a world where there's inflation. I think Australians understand that. There's a lot of pressure, upward pressure, on interest rates at the moment. They're not my words, they're his. The Leader of the Opposition. They are the words of the Leader of the Opposition on the 3rd of May 2000.
I mean, really, it's just a big joke to this man, isn't it? There's Albo right there, of course, looking very happy with himself. Just life is one big joke and blame Liberal, blame Labor. But what we don't see from either party right there in the House of Representatives at a federal level is the government talking about the root cause behind why exactly interest rates are rising and what the government, God forbid, could have done differently to potentially safeguard Australians, to safeguard Australian homeowners from inevitably losing their dream, their family home. So first, I'm just going to show you the extent to which interest rates have risen. I'm going to talk about what is likely going to proceed from this point forward. And we're going to have a very basic conversation about some of the factors involved when interest rates rises, cause and effect, that type of thing. Now, please note, I am not an economist, but the stuff we're talking about on the show is like really, really basic, 1 + 1 = 2, that type of basic stuff. Anyway, just taking a look here, ladies and gentlemen, we look at the cash rate from the RBA was all the way down at 0.1% back in April of 2022, hitting 3.35% on February 2023, representing a drastic rise. In terms of how that affects people's mortgages for domestic property, you have a look at around this time last year, the rate was down around 3.5%, and now it's about 6.5%. If you're lucky, might be a bit more, or if you're very lucky, maybe a little bit less. So what I want to show you is how this is affecting the repayments for mortgages here in our country. All right, so here's a hypothetical scenario based on a $500,000 loan from 1 year ago at an interest rate of 3.5%, repayments consisting of principal and interest, equated to $2,245 per month and 22 cents. That same loan today is $3,160.34 per month, representing an increase of $915.12 per month, or $10,981.44 per annum. Now you tell me, which working class family just happens to have an extra $11,000 just laying around? Anthony Albanese should really be ashamed of himself for pointing the finger. And you know what? The Liberal Party should as well, because they know why these interest rates are taking place, but they'll never accept ownership for it, because if they do, what else do they accept? They accept fault, and that would be very, very bad for them politically speaking. They'd feel it at the polls. And I think there's one thing we all know is that these politicians care first and foremost about votes. Alrighty, so another example here. Let's talk about a $1 million home loan. This time last year, you'd be looking at repayments at 3.5%, equating to $4,490.45 per month. Whereas today, that same loan, $6,320.68, representing an increase of $1,830.23 per month, or $21,962.76 per annum. So put that into perspective, ladies and gentlemen. We look at the cost of living in this country. Of course, we see inflation, the devaluing of our currency. We see the increases in energy, fuel, food, and in addition now with the increases in interest rates, and given the fact that wages are stagnate and our population is growing, so there's going to be less to go around, less money supply, how many Australians are going to slide into poverty as a result of how our country has been governed, especially over the past 3 years? Well, I'll tell you one person who's not sliding into poverty anytime soon, and that is indeed our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who is most fortunate enough to live in a mansion rent-free, it's called Kirribilli, whilst receiving an additional $1,350 a week from his property portfolio, right? And that's in addition to his wage and all the perks that he receives as Prime Minister. So I think I do understand why it is a joke for Albo, because he's not feeling the pinch and he can just get on the floor of Parliament and act like he's some sort of clown performing in a circus. And at the end of the day, he will never rub shoulders with the true working class of this country who are going to be affected as a result of the government's inept governing. All right, so I've got a few dot points here. We're just going to have a bit of a talk about interest rates and some of the cause and effects. And once again, I am not an economist, but you don't need to be to really bring up these types of topics. This is basic stuff. This is like primary school level math, 1 + 1 = 2. All right, so first of all, when we see the interest rates rise, that will most likely lead to a downswing in the property market. That's right. So we'll see properties decreasing in value. So in addition to a huge amount of Australians who I'm sure now are destined to lose their homes, an extra kick in the guts is that those homes will become very, very much depreciated in value. So what happens after that stage? We see the banks repossessing homes, and shortly after, I have no doubt we'll also see an influx of predatory investors swooping in to purchase those formerly distressed properties. Maybe the government will open the doors to international investors. Maybe we'll see an influx of Chinese capital, American capital, capital from various countries around the world seeking to capitalize off a very distressed Australian property market at the expense of crushed dreams and ambitions of Australians. So that's something that we could very well see, especially should interest rates continue to rise. I was having a chat on the phone before with a friend of mine, a good mate of mine up in Queensland, Steve Dixon. Lots of you know who he is. And he's convinced that interest rates are just going to keep moving up higher and higher. So another question is, how did we get here? And could this have been avoided? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to first understand what are some of the factors that will instigate these types of rises in interest rates. So I've got a list here. I'm just going to speak to you about it. So first of all, we can look at inflation. Our government has been on a tear, printing money, injecting money into our local economy. And what we know is that with the printing of money comes the devaluation of our dollar. Okay, so that's a contributing factor right there. Another factor is excessive government spending. Okay, so let me ask you the question, how much has our government on a federal, state and territory level spent on the COVID-19 response over the past 3 years? Okay, so we're looking at, of course, in the billions of dollars, multiple billions of dollars. But when we also take into account the losses in terms of economic productivity and the shutting down of our industries, we're looking at a huge loss to Australia that by any estimates would have to be no less than $1 trillion, maybe more than our GDP. It's very hard to find accurate estimates on this figure, ladies and gentlemen, but if you can sit at home and just do a little bit of mathematics in your head and you think, how much did the government spend on the COVID response? How much have we lost in terms of industrial and economic productivity? That's when you'll start to understand the strain of the economy, which of course leads to a deficit in money supply. So we see the interest rates rising, indicating a shortage in money supply. Just like a supply and demand model for any business, prices are dictated by supply and demand. So the less money around, the higher interest rates will increase, and the greater perceived risk out there right now in terms of lending that there is, the higher interest rates will rise once again, because of course the RBA is looking to mitigate their risk when it comes to lending. So if the general perception of the RBA is that Australians will struggle to repay their loans, which of course they will, given the rise in interest rates and the huge increases to the cost of living, therefore the banking general financial system is looking to hedge their bets by raising interest rates in order to compensate for the additional risk that's out there in the market. Also, another contributing factor is deficit spending, so governments outspending their budgets, and of course we have seen that here in Australia, both at a federal, state and territory level. Once again, in the response to COVID-19, governments outspending their budgets without any plan for economic recovery, spending money that they don't have, and of course, as a result of that, our debt has reached an unprecedented level that very well may burden future generations for many years to come. So these are just some of the factors involved that can impact these rises. Once again, this is just really basic stuff, but even simply what I've mentioned today, it'd be nice if the government came out to at least address these concerns, address the failures in governance, address why, for instance, the government did not look at a pandemic response such as the Great Barrington Declaration, which is centered around protecting the vulnerable, but allowing those who are not at risk to continue living their everyday lives, including activities such as running a business, etc., manufacturing, exporting, keeping the farms open, and so forth. So what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think that we will see the government own up to their disastrous decisions that they made during COVID-19? Or do you think we'll simply see the Liberal Labor blame game continue? Nobody takes responsibility, and therefore it's nobody's fault. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we need different people in politics in this country. Been saying it for a few years now, and all this proves is that we, the people, need to roll our sleeves up. We need to work harder. We need to fight harder. We can change things around here in Australia. Australia is beautiful. It's worth fighting for. It's going to be very difficult to steer the ship straight. Very difficult, but not impossible. You just have to have faith in your fellow Australians, stay patriotic, love this country, and recognise that those who serve within the walls of our parliament are nothing more than a bunch of clowns performing in a circus. Thank you for watching. To make sure you never miss an episode, sign up at mcjreport.com. Catch you on the next one.